This is the News Hour here on Block TV. I am Fatou Drame. Thank you for joining us. Tonight on our news, West African leaders have agreed to maintain the economic troops in the Gambia until 2021, the year the country is expecting to hold a constitutional referendum and a crucial presidential election. And talking of elections, the PPP's Tumanjai has indicated she may be seeking to become the party's presidential candidate and could be challenging Papanjai for its leadership. The government of the Gambia has accused the government of the United States for interfering with the work of the International Criminal Court and demand that the American government withdraw sanctions against the court's Gambian chief prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda. The country's former Vice President, Fatmata Tambajang, has been nominated by President Adama Barrow to become the Vice President of the African Union Commission. Two other Gambians have also been nominated to become the Union's Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture. I am Fatou Drame. Thank you for joining us. While Mali is the center of security discussions at the Niamey ECOWAS Summit, the issue of economic troops in the country was discussed. The West African leaders agreed to extend the mandate of the economic mission in the Gambia until 2021. The Gambia will be holding a referendum and the presidential election that year. The presidential election is expected to be contentious. Mr. Barrow, who has refused to step down after ruling for 3 years, will be facing off with Ousainou Darboe of the UDP. UDP was Barrow's party before breaking ranks with them and firing Mr. Darboe from vice presidency. There has been aggressions between supporters of Mr. Darboe and Mr. Barrow, while concerns remain high that there are significant figures within the ranks of the country's army that continue to remain loyal to former President Yahya Jammeh. Security experts have warned that the absence of the economic troops could likely fuel a military takeover of government. Previous attempts, when Barrow first came to power, were failed before they could be launched, leading to a court-martial giving a decade-long sentence to some members of the Gambia Armed Forces. It seems like the Gambia may see more female presidential candidates next year. PPP's Tuma Ousainou Njie has declared her intention to seek her party's candidacy for the 2021 presidential polls. Tuma Njie will be challenging Papanjai, the current leader of the PPP, before facing off with Barrow or potential allying with him. PPP was the country's first government after the Gambia gained its independence from Britain. It remained in power until it was booted out in 1994 by the military regime of Yahya Jammeh. We're now being joined by Alaji Mane, a journalist with the Standard newspaper. Alaji, thank you for being here. What are Tuma Njie's chances of becoming the leader of the PPP?
So that's a very complicated question. But of course, PPP, like any other party, would of course at some point have to go for a Congress. And so it is at this Congress where, of course, people interested in vying for its leadership would, of course, present themselves, and then, they take it up from there. So the chances of her becoming the PPP's leader, well, that is anyone's guess. I'm not so I can independently say whether or not that's in fact going to be the case here. But it will be interesting, nevertheless, to see how things pan out as the election cycle opens very soon.
The current PPP leader, Papanjai's rise to the top of the party was without controversy. It shows he was highly favored. Doesn't this dampen Tuma's challenge?
Papanjai is a person who has a very positive track record when it comes to not just education, but social and other sectors here in the country. He's played a tremendous role. He has done his bits and pieces in uplifting a lot of young people out here, and he's made a name for himself during his time at the US Embassy and all that. But again, this is politics, and in politics, one can never really tell what's going to happen next. Of course, when Papanjai, we all know, of course, he was a, well, let's just say, let me take you back down the history lane a bit. When he first came up as an aspirant in the KMC mayoral election, even though he did not do very well in that. It went a long way in fomenting his place in Gambian politics. And so it will be interesting, of course. Of course, there are a lot of observers out there who believe the sole leader of PPP will always be Papanjai. But now, despite Tumanjai coming out declaring her intent to put her head over the parapet to lead the country when the next election cycle opens, the chances are that Papanjai will retain his leadership in the PPP. And yeah, but the bigger question is whether or not PPP has what it takes to come to power. That is a question for another day.
Do you think there are political divisions still existing in the party? Perhaps a leadership confidence crisis within the party causing Tuma to seek the party's leadership?
Serious issues in recent years, specifically with regards to its leadership issues. We've seen here how Papanjai came out and fervently defended his desire to continue being the leader of the People's Progressive Party. But interestingly too, we saw on a QTV group, we saw people making accusations against the PPP, with many other people saying Papanjai has gone out of his way to cement how do you call it, himself as the sole leader of the PPP, of course. But the question is I think it's a very critical one. I'm not even sure if I'm the right person to ask this question. I particularly don't see myself as a political analyst, even though I try as much to know as possible when it comes to Gambian politics. But nevertheless, I don't think I would be able to do justice to this very difficult question.
Okay. What does Tuma's attempt to become a party leader mean ahead of the 2021 elections?
That's a very interesting question. Now, we have seen here in the past ladies who come forward to declare their intent. They've actually put their heads over what my boss would say, or they put their heads over the parapet and declare their intent to lead the country, to join politics, and lead the country in the next presidential election. She is not the first lady to come out to do this. Now, we've all been here, and we heard loud and clear when Marisol came out and declared her intent to run for the presidency as well in the 2021 general elections. We have to understand there's a perception when it comes to ladies, Gambian, female politicians, in Gambian politics. Now they've been subjected to a barrage of abuse, even male chauvinism. So at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to their ability to develop that thick skin, to stonewall some of those barrages that people throw at them, you know. So I think Tuma is a very strong woman. Outwardly, she appeared to seem so. So it will be interesting, though. Well, also, she has a history of controversies. We've all heard here when she said, called for the abolition of Moses in public places. That didn't seem to go down very well with a lot of people, since the Gambia is seen largely as a religious or Muslim country. Nevertheless, so I think issues like that and many others, I think at some point would go a long way in defining whether or not Tumanjai make headway in Gambian political fray.
Thank you very much, Alaji Mane. We appreciate your time. A 20-ton truck has lost its balance, breaking off the trailer at the Gambia Ports Authority. The truck was carrying about 26 tons of goods to neighboring Senegal. Authorities at the Gambian port said they quickly acted, hoping to recover some of the goods that the truck was carrying, and had the truck removed from the ram to avoid further delays of the ferry services. A planned strike by the market vendors have been put on hold as negotiations with the government kicks off. The market union, which is backing the strike, wants authorities to extend the time allowed for vendors to sell from 7 in the morning to 5 in the evening. The Secretary General of the Serekunda market, Seydina Kebe, said that they decided to put the strike on hold after receiving communications from the country's Vice President, Aïssatou Touré, promising to have their concerns addressed. Regulations in an effort to curb the global COVID-19 pandemic have made the Gambian government to put strict measures in place, enforcing a curfew and tight hours for market operations. The government of the Gambia is expressing its disapproval of sanctions by Trump's administration, imposing against Fatou Bensouda, the Gambian-born chief prosecutor, and other staffs of the International Criminal Court. According to the Barrow government, the decision of the Trump administration constitutes gross interference on the mandate, independence and impartiality of the International Criminal Court in the fight against impunity, perpetrators of the most serious crimes of international concerns. The United States has been at odds with Bensouda after hinting she could probe the involvement of U.S. soldiers in atrocities in Iraq and Palestine. Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital in Banjul has launched an investigation into the death of Fatmata Tiba amid allegations that nurses at the country's main referral hospital failed to attend to the pregnant woman because they feared she had COVID-19. A test on her remains turned out negative. Mrs. Tiba, who delivered twins at the ASP hospital in Latrikunda, German, via C-section but developed complications and was taken to the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital, where she was allegedly refused service and dying. The Gambia has nominated 3 of its citizens to become commissioners at the African Union, including the former Vice President Fatmata Jallow Tambajang. Ms. Tambajang has enjoyed the support of the African Union during the turbulent transition that brought President Adama Barrow to power. She continued to have good relations with the Barrow government even after her removal from the vice presidency. Mrs. Tambajang oversaw the negotiations that united the opposition against former President Yahya Jammeh and was a figure in the mediation that was led by ECOWAS. She built strong relations with other African leaders during her time as the country's vice president, and at a time that the country was enjoying robust international support and praise for its democratic gains. Fatmata Tambajang has been nominated to become the vice chair of the African Union, and diplomatic efforts by the Gambia are on the way to secure her the seat. We are now joined by Sam Fati, an African affairs analyst. Sam, thank you for joining us. What are Mrs. Tambajang's chances of becoming the vice chair of the African Union?
With her current record and her current standings, Mrs. Tambajang do stand a very high chance. I believe she is strongly a candidate for the vice chair of the African Union. She is a front runner in this. It may come to some as a surprise, but I can certainly tell you she enjoys the full support and backing of the government of the Gambia and even the regional body ECOWAS. And Gambia would be on a very high level diplomatic effort where they'll be sending members or service officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to go to other countries outside of ECOWAS to lobby and to ensure that they get their support and vote to have Fatmata Tambajang as the vice chair of the African Union Commission.
Why do you think she is a frontrunner with such high chances?
When the whole 2016 election situation was going on in the Gambia, Fatmata Tambajang was in the forefront of it all in terms of mediation and negotiation with West African leaders, the African Union, and in communication with the United Nations, especially crucially at that time, that is the United Nations Security Council. So she has a lot of experience in that sector. Looking at 2021, 2022, there would be a lot of presidential elections in Africa, especially in West Africa, where they already have issues about tenure, and there are going to be a lot of controversies and violence. So Mrs. Tambajang's experience and what happened in the Gambia was unprecedented, and it will come in handy. So that is why she will enjoy a lot of support from ECOWAS. Mind you, at the time that she was vice president, she traveled a lot to the African Union as well. So she was able to network and build a lot of great reputation for herself. And Gambia was enjoying a lot of support at that particular point in time in terms of democratization. So all of that experience, and looking at the situation in Guinea, the impending situation in Ivory Coast, this current situation in Mali, and what is probably going to happen in South Sudan and other parts of Africa and during the 2021-2022 presidential electoral seasons, Mrs. Tambajang's collective experience in ensuring smooth transitions, especially when you have long-term leaders, to ensuring democracy and maintaining constitutionality will be very important.
What are the potential impacts she could make as vice chair?
I mean, the vice chair is more ceremonial, but again, the potential impacts that she can make is that instead of just being a ceremonial role or just being at the African Union head office in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, due to her experience, she would be more out in the field, even more than the current the African Union chairperson. Mind you, too, Mrs. Tambajang had a great deal of experience working at the United Nations office in Liberia. So, and that was during the time that Liberia was going through conflict and post-conflict reconstruction. So all of that experience matters. So it will not help to keep her in the office. So with that experience, she will be sent a lot as a delegate in order to mediate and take care of certain crises in other parts of the continent. So I believe that aside from the fact that she is Gambian, so I'm not trying to be biased there, but I also believe that all those experience matters, and especially for a woman. Sometimes it's harder when you get men to negotiate with other men as politicians, but for a woman, she can find a very fine line.
What will her election mean for the Gambia?
Election actually will mean a great deal for the Gambia, because it means that now again we have had Gambians in very high level positions in the international and diplomatic community, from the United Nations to ECOWAS, and even at certain level to the African Union level. And African Union probably not this high, and it will be for the first time, but it would also show the level of maturity in Gambian politics. Mind you, that Mrs. Tambajang was vice president to President Adama Barrow. She was fired from her job, yes, but she still maintained a very good relationship with the government and other political parties. Now, despite the disagreement within the Gambia about President Barrow's tenure, she was able to renegotiate with some of the oppositions to have it extended in order to conform with the constitution. That is something that we can all agree or disagree on, but she was able to maintain that relationship with all political parties, even those that were accused of trying to make sure that she was removed from the vice presidency. The fact that she would keep her composure and differentiate the two and still be able to work politically with all of these different political parties in the Gambia shows the level of maturity within the politics and the respect that dwells between her and the current president, Adama Barrow. So to the extent that Barrow is nominating her to be a vice chair at the African Union Commission says a lot.
Well, Sam, thank you very much for your time. Also nominated to become commissioners at the African Union are Gambians Mr. Katim Toure and Enes Ubi. The two are nominated by the Gambia to become African Union Commissioners for Rural Economy and Agriculture. Well, viewers, this is all we have for you in today's news review. Thank you for your time.